The day Amina sent the text that would unravel her entire life had been, until that very moment, profoundly ordinary. It was a Tuesday, and the sky outside her small apartment was the color of faded denim. She worked as a florist, and her hands still smelled faintly of earth and freesia from the day's work. The argument with her best friend Chloe had been one of those silly, bubbling over disputes about a borrowed sweater that was returned with a small, unmentioned stain. It was the kind of petty frustration that feels enormous in the moment, but shrinks to nothing by the next morning. Fuming, Amina had picked up her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen with heated purpose. The message was short, brutal, and supremely satisfying to type out. Fuck you. She pressed send before the logical part of her brain could intervene. The satisfaction lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then a cold dread, sharp and immediate, trickled down her spine. She had been texting Chloe from a new group chat the night before. The number at the top of her current screen was not Chloe's. It was an unfamiliar string of digits, one she must have entered incorrectly days ago when a client called to place a large order for a corporate event. Her heart did a painful, lurching somersault in her chest. She had just sent a deeply offensive message to a complete and total stranger. Panic set in, a frantic, fluttering bird trapped in her ribcage. Her first instinct was to throw her phone across the room as if it had bitten her. She paced the length of her small living room, the cozy space suddenly feeling like a cage. What if it was an elderly person? What if it was one of her important clients? The shame was hot and prickly on her skin. She snatched the phone back up, her fingers trembling so badly she could barely type. A torrent of apologies spilled forth. I am so sorry, she typed. That was not for you. It was a complete accident. Wrong number. Please forgive me. She held her breath, staring at the screen, waiting for a confused, "Who is this?" or perhaps an angry reply. The 3 little dots appeared almost instantly, indicating the stranger was typing. Her stomach clenched. The reply came, and it was not what she expected. It was not confused. It was cold, precise, and carried a weight that felt heavier than the words themselves. "Who is this?" the text read. "Do you know who you are talking to?" The phrasing was odd, formal, and sent a fresh wave of chills through her. It wasn't a question, it was a warning. This was not an elderly person or a confused client. This person sounded dangerous. She considered not replying, blocking the number and pretending the whole thing never happened. But her conscience, that stubborn, moral compass, wouldn't allow it. She had to fix this. "My name is Amina," she typed back, deciding honesty was her only option. "I'm a florist. I was trying to text my friend Chloe after a stupid fight, and I must have typed your number wrong. I am genuinely very sorry for the rude message. It was totally unprofessional and not meant for you." She sent it and waited, her teeth worrying her bottom lip. The dots appeared again, a longer wait this time. "A florist," the reply came. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, as if he was turning the idea over in his mind. "You have quite a temper for someone who works with flowers." Amina blinked. Was he making a joke? A dry, barely there one, but a joke nonetheless? The ice around the situation cracked just a fraction. "Usually I'm very calm," she wrote back, a small, relieved breath escaping her. "But that sweater was cashmere." This time the reply was quicker. "Cashmere justifies many things." And just like that, a conversation began. It was stilted at first, a careful back and forth across a digital tightrope. His name was Minjai. He was vague about his work, only calling it family business that kept him very busy. Amina found herself telling him about her shop, about the stubborn rose bushes she was trying to grow on her tiny balcony, about how her favorite part of the day was the quiet hour before opening when the shop was full of silent, beautiful things. He listened, or rather he read, and his replies, while always brief, were thoughtful. He asked questions. He wanted to know why yellow roses were her least favorite to arrange, and she explained it was because they were too cheerful, lacking the depth of the deep red or the quiet mystery of the lavender ones. Hours slipped by. The night deepened outside her window and the silly argument with Chloe was forgotten, replaced by this strange, captivating connection with a voice in the dark. He was sharp, intelligent, and she sensed a profound loneliness in the spaces between his words. The man on the other end of the phone was no longer a scary stranger, He was a person, a complicated, intriguing person who had made her laugh twice with his dry, observant humor. After a week of this, of texts that started in the afternoon and stretched late into the night, Min-jae sent a new message. I would like to meet, in person, to see if the voice matches the person. Amina's heart hammered against her ribs. Meet? The safe, anonymous bubble of their texting was about to pop. This was real. This was dangerous in a completely different way. He suggested a coffee shop in a busy, well-lit part of the city, a place she knew well. He was being considerate, she realized. He was trying to make her feel safe. After a long moment of hesitation, her curiosity and the undeniable pull she felt won out. Okay, she typed back. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. The following day, she arrived 10 minutes early, her palms damp. She chose a table near the window, the afternoon sun warming her back. She watched the door, her nerves a live wire, and then he walked in. He was taller than she had imagined, with a quiet, commanding presence that made the air in the room seem to shift. He was handsome, with sharp features and dark, intelligent eyes that scanned the room and found her instantly. For a fraction of a second, as his gaze landed on her, she saw a flicker of surprise. It was there and gone so quickly she almost missed it, but it was unmistakable. He was surprised she was black. She held her breath, wondering if this was where the fantasy would end. But then he walked over to her table, his steps measured and sure. He gave a small, formal bow of his head. Amina. His voice was exactly as she had imagined it from his text. Deep, calm, and layered with a quiet intensity. It sent a shiver down her spine. Min-jae, she said, hoping her voice didn't tremble. It's nice to finally meet you. He sat down and for a moment, they just looked at each other. The real person across from her, both matching and exceeding the image in her mind. The conversation was awkward for the first few minutes. The transition from digital to physical, a clumsy one. But then she made a joke about the terrible art on the cafe walls, and he smiled. It was a small, real smile that completely transformed his face, making his eyes crinkle at the corners. And just like that, the connection snapped back into place, stronger and more real than ever. The man who had received her angry text was sitting right in front of her, and he was smiling. The world after the coffee shop felt different, painted in colors Amina hadn't noticed before. The first meeting could have been a fluke, a curious epilogue to their strange beginning, but it was not. Min-jae asked to see her again, and she, without a moment of genuine hesitation, said yes. Their second meeting was a walk through a sprawling, manicured park at the edge of the city. It was here that Amina began to piece together the mosaic of the man named Min-jae. He moved through the world with a silent authority that people instinctively responded to. A flick of his wrist could summon a waiter from across a restaurant. A subtle shift in his posture could make a boisterous group nearby quieten their voices. People were often nervous around him, their laughter a bit too high, their words a bit too careful. Amina saw the way they looked at him, a mixture of respect and fear, and she saw the quiet isolation it bred in him. He was like a king on a lonely throne, surrounded by people yet utterly alone. But with her, the fortress walls came down. He asked her questions about her life, her dreams of owning a second flower shop, her complicated relationship with her large, noisy family who lived across the country. He listened, truly listened, as if her words were the most important thing he would hear all day. It was on their fifth date, a quiet dinner at a secluded Korean barbecue restaurant, where the staff treated Min-jae with a deference that bordered on reverence, that he first opened up about his world. He didn't use words like mafia or crime. He spoke of legacy, of a business built by his grandfather, of responsibilities that were as heavy as stone, and a future that was already mapped out for him. He spoke of the constant need for strength, for making difficult decisions that affected countless lives. He told her that in his world, showing emotion was seen as a crack in your armor, a weakness for your enemies to exploit. My father, he said, his voice low, taught me that love is a strategic disadvantage. The confession hung in the air between them, a testament to the profound loneliness his power had inflicted upon him. Amina's heart ached for him. She reached across the small table, ignoring the sizzle of the meat, and placed her hand over his. His hand was still, his skin warm. He looked down at their hands, then back at her face. his dark eyes wide with a vulnerability she knew he showed no one else. He slowly turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. The connection was electric, a simple touch that felt more intimate than any kiss she had ever known. It was a silent promise, a bridge built between their two impossible worlds. The walk back to her apartment that night was quiet, the city sounds muffled as if they were in their own private bubble. The air was cool, and a few autumn leaves skittered across the pavement. When they reached her doorstep, bathed in the soft yellow glow of the porch light, he didn't let go of her hand. He turned to face her, his other hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. His thumb stroked her skin, a slow, deliberate caress that made her breath catch in her throat. "Your accidental text," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name, "was the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me. Everyone else tells me what they think I want to hear. You, you just told me the truth." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't move. She rose onto her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was not rushed or demanding. It was soft, a slow, searching exploration. It was sweet, tasting of the tea they had drunk after dinner, and something uniquely, essentially him. It was a kiss that held all the unspoken words of their late-night texts and quiet conversations. When they finally broke apart, her head was spinning, her entire body humming with a warmth that started deep in her core and radiated outwards. He rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing heavily in the quiet night. "Good night, Amina," he said, his voice husky. He waited until she was safely inside before turning to leave. The following week, he cooked dinner for her at his penthouse apartment. It was a vast, minimalist space, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. It was beautiful, but it felt more like a museum than a home, devoid of personal touches, a physical manifestation of his lonely life. He moved around the kitchen with a focused intensity, preparing a traditional Korean meal. The intimacy of the scene was profound. The sizzle of garlic in a pan, the steam fogging the windows, the way he would glance at her to make sure she was comfortable. After dinner, they stood by the large window, watching the tiny lights of the cars far below. He stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her head. She could feel the solid, steady beat of his heart against her back. He turned her around to face him, and the look in his eyes was no longer one of quiet loneliness, but of a fierce, burning want. This kiss was nothing like the first. It was not soft or searching. It was deep and hungry, a torrent of pent-up emotion finally breaking free. It was a mature, spicy collision of need and desire. His hands slid from her waist down to her hips, pulling her firmly against him, leaving no space between their bodies. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the evidence of his own desire pressing against her. The world outside the windows ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his mouth on hers, the possessive strength of his hands, the low groan that rumbled in his chest when she tangled her fingers in his hair. It was a kiss that spoke of late nights and tangled sheets, of a passion that was as undeniable as their first connection. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their foreheads resting together once more. But this time the air was charged with a new, thrilling understanding. He saw her, all of her, and he wanted her with the intensity that matched her own. The quiet, powerful man had let her in, and in doing so, had shown her a side of himself that was wild, passionate, and utterly, completely hers. The golden haze of their new intimacy could not last forever. The real world, with its sharp edges and complicated rules, was always waiting just outside the door of Minjae's penthouse, or the warm threshold of Amina's flower-filled apartment. The trouble began subtly, like the first chill wind that warns of a coming storm. A man in a dark, expensive suit appeared at her flower shop one Tuesday afternoon. He did not look at the flowers. His eyes, cold and assessing, were only for Amina. He placed no order, asked no questions. He simply stood for a long, silent minute, his gaze tracing the lines of her face, the shape of her hands, before turning and leaving without a word. A deep, primal fear, cold and slick, coiled in Amina's stomach. This was not a customer. This was a message. That evening, she told Minjae, she described the man, the silent intimidation, the feeling of being hunted. Minjae's face, usually so carefully composed for her, hardened into a mask of terrifying calm. His eyes, which had been so warm and tender just hours before, turned to chips of black ice. He did not rage or shout. Instead, he became very still, the stillness of a predator who has just identified a threat. "I will handle it," he said, his voice low and devoid of all the softness she had come to cherish. It was the voice of the boss, the leader, the man from the other side of the text. In that moment, she saw the two halves of him clearly, the man who loved her and the man who ruled a dangerous world. The next day, a different man came to the shop. He was younger, with a nervous energy, and he spoke in a rushed, apologetic tone. He explained that he was sent by a concerned party who felt Minjai was losing his focus, that his relationship with her was a distraction, a vulnerability. "It would be better for everyone," the man said, avoiding her eyes, "if you ended things. For your own safety." The threat was veiled in polite language, but it was a threat all the same. They were not trying to scare Minjai, they were trying to scare her. They believed she was the weak point, the one who would break under pressure and run, thereby solving their problem for them. Amina listened, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The fear was still there, a cold stone in her gut, but as the man spoke, something else began to burn alongside it, a fierce, defiant anger. She was not a wilting flower. She was a woman who had built a business with her own hands, who dealt with thorns every day to get to the beauty. She thought of Minjai's loneliness, the weight of his legacy, the way he had trusted her with his fragile, true self. She thought of the man who cooked her dinner and held her like she was the most precious thing in his world. She would not be the one to betray that trust. She would not be the one who ran. When the man finished his rehearsed speech, Amina stood up straight, her shoulders squared. She looked him directly in the eye, her own gaze steady and clear. "You tell whoever sent you," she said, her voice not shaking, not even a little, "that I am not going anywhere. My heart belongs to Minjai, and I do not give up on what is mine." The man looked stunned, as if he had expected tears or pleading. He simply nodded, turned, and left. She called Minjai immediately and told him everything, repeating her own words back to him. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with an emotion so raw it stole her breath. "No one," he whispered, "has ever fought for me before." The confrontation that followed happened in the shadows of Minjai's world. A world Amina only heard about in vague terms later. He gathered the concerned parties, the elders and rivals who had challenged his judgment. He did not negotiate. He laid down the new law of his reign with a finality that brooked no argument. He told them that Amina was not a distraction. She was his foundation. She was not a weakness. She was his only true strength. To target her was to target him directly, and he made it devastatingly clear that any such challenge would be the last mistake anyone ever made. He solidified his power not in spite of her, but because of her. Her bravery had given him a new, unshakable purpose. A week later, the city was blooming under a soft spring sun. Minjai took her back to the park, where they had taken their first walk, where the first seeds of their trust had been planted. The cherry blossoms were in full, glorious bloom, creating a canopy of pale pink overhead. They walked in comfortable silence, his hand firmly holding hers. He led her to a quiet bench beneath the most magnificent tree, its petals drifting down around them like scented snow. He stopped and turned to face her, his expression more open and more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Amina," he began, his voice soft, "my life before you was a series of transactions. Everything had a price. Every word had a purpose. Every relationship was a calculation." He reached out and took both of her hands in his thumbs stroking her knuckles. "And then this beautiful, furious florist sent me the most honest message I had ever received." A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "You crashed into my world and filled all the empty spaces I didn't even know were there. You brought color and light and a truth I never knew I was missing." He slowly, deliberately, lowered himself to one knee on the soft, petal-strewn grass. Amina's breath hitched, her free hand flying to her mouth. He pulled a small black velvet box from his pocket. When he opened it, the diamond inside was not overly large or flashy, but it was exquisite, catching the dappled sunlight and scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. "You stood by me when others would have fled," he said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. You saw the man behind the title, and you were not afraid. You are my courage, Amina. You are my home. Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? Will you promise me your forever? As I promise you all of mine? Tears streamed freely down Amina's face. Happy, relieved, overwhelming tears. She looked at this strong, powerful man on his knees for her, offering her his entire heart and future. There was no hesitation in her soul. Yes, she breathed, her voice cracking with emotion. Yes, Minjai. 1,000 times, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. It felt not like a piece of jewelry, but like a part of her, the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't known was incomplete. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that held the weight of every lonely night he had ever endured and every joyful morning they would now share. The cherry blossoms continued to fall around them, a silent, beautiful witness to a promise made. Their love story, born from a mistaken message of anger, had found its perfect, peaceful beginning in a promise of forever. If you were swept away by Amina and Minjay's journey from a shocking text to a lifetime of love, don't miss a single one of our stories. Subscribe now to be the first to know when our next unforgettable romance begins.